When I was a faithful Latter-day Saint, by the way, I'm calling tonight's show Streaming Consciousness, because I started to work on part 4 of creation, and I just didn't have it in me. And this stuff started coming out, so I'm calling it Streaming Consciousness. When I was LDS, even when I was an ardent evangelical, as ardent as I possibly could be, I was under the impression that all of us are here in our present state based on our decisions, based on my good decisions or my bad decisions. That if somebody is suffering, it's because of their bad decisions. If somebody is doing well, it's because they have chosen right. And this is a really convenient belief to hold as a WASM, which is different from a WASP. A WASP is a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. A WASM is a white Anglo-Saxon Mormon. So it's really convenient for me to hold that idea. And it was an attitude that led me to be very congratulatory toward people who are successful around, and very just as condemnatory at the other end of people who are failures in society. The societal failures, they're that way because of their own damn making, you know. And in my condemnation, I actually believe that God was right with me, you know, like in Animal House. Sorry to admit I saw that movie 40 times. But in that movie, Satan and the devil, Satan and an angel pop up and try to convince a guy in that movie to do terrible things. And the angel saying, don't do it, don't do it. And the Satan saying, do it, do it. And, you know, I always thought that in my condemnation of people who were in bad straits, who are drug addicted or having problems, that God was saying, that's right, Shawn, look at them. They are making bad choices. The other day I had a string of conversations that caused me to rethink these attitudes, and this happens, and so I rethink them, and to arrive at better conclusions. The day began when my brother Warren, and I hope he doesn't mind me asking this, I told him I was going to ask him if I could do this, but he called me, and he said, you know, I want to talk to you about your brother's suicide. And Warren does Breaking Bread, and you see clips of his show on our website, and he revealed that he had a brother too who took his own life. Interestingly, we both were LDS, and we talked about how our brothers' respective suicides played a role in our eyes kind of opening up to the facade of religion, and our eyes opening up to, hey, there's something wrong in the woodshed here, we're not really sure what, and to bring us to the truth. We also admitted that while our brothers' deaths, respective deaths, caused a lot of pain in our lives through these actions, and while their actions are sorrowful and sad, they not only led both of us in some way to coming to know the truth, but they have indirectly also led to, in Warren's ministry and our ministry, to tens of thousands of people coming to know the truth. And so, in other words, by and through their suffering, even through their deaths, others have come to have life. Now you might think, well, that's really taking, it's really not a stretch. There is a correlation between what happened in my life and talking to Warren, I think in his, directly between my brother's suicide and me saying, I gotta wake the heck up here and see what's going on around me in terms of religion. So this was unique for me to consider after talking to Warren. The day wore on and I kept pondering our discussion. 2 hours later, I got a call from my middle daughter, Cassidy. Now, Cassidy grew up with Delaney and Mallory in Huntington Beach. She received a call from a friend who had just been to a 7-Eleven down there, and she saw a man who was sitting there, and he didn't have shoes on, and he was homeless, obviously, and his face was covered in scabs and cuts, and he was barefoot, but he had a stack of shoes that had apparently been given to him for his condition. But what makes the story applicable to my thoughts of the day was this was a long-time family friend. This was a kid that we know really, really well. It wasn't just a passing acquaintance. Cassidy's best friend is his sister. And she grew up from a child in kindergarten up in their family, sleepovers and everything, knowing this young man. But what truly makes this even more applicable is that we have known that for half of his 24 years, he has battled with substances. I mean, battled with substances. Now, he came from, and we are first-hand witnesses. You can say, well, you don't know what happened behind the scenes. I'm going to tell you. We know the family. And what happened behind the scenes was support, was guidance, was attending all sporting activities. He was intellectual. He was fairly smart. He was a very good athlete. He was a handsome kid. He was popular as a result of those things, but he wasn't indulged. There was none of those prototypical things that we assign as to the reason. I am convinced that the path he has thus far walked in his life is his lot in life. Now you might think, no way. I am convinced. I am convinced that he was born with these proclivities, and listen, into a home that it was, and I am similarly convinced that the role he is currently playing in society, listen, is as purposeful, kill that fly, as the hundreds of other kids who will become accountants and clerks and firefighters. I am convinced that his role will play just as an important role. In other words, like my brother and Warren's brother who took their own lives, this homeless boy's role may be to teach hundreds of other kids in the community to avoid substances altogether. And through his suffering, maybe God uses that to help others live. Because in and through his suffering publicly now, others are able to live. Extrapolate this thought out across the world, and we may find ourselves better able to see that God has and does and will use people to accomplish certain things. And some of them, in fact, most of them, are called to great suffering. Schizophrenics, who when they reach their teens suddenly become schizophrenic, just suddenly are there and they have that lot for life. You want to see suffering? I've told stories before about being downtown when we lived down there and having schizophrenics and the conditions that they are in. Does God use that? Does he use their presence for good? I think so. People who are diseased, dementia, body, mind, are poor, are uneducated. The people who are trapped in religious systems, the people who are free from religious systems, all of them are used just as much, in my opinion, as our great industrialists, as our great creators, as the gainfully employed, as the devout. However, all have, because of this, we do not have a right to look down our nose at what is happening in someone's life. We cannot fall prey to the temptation that somebody is suffering because, or somebody's life hasn't turned out the way we think it should because they deserve it. I don't believe that anymore. God is not a respecter of persons. None in his eyes are any better than any other. There is no Trump and bum on the street here. There is none of that with God, okay? So amidst this, we might ask ourselves, why have I been permitted to escape the suffering that some others have endured? Or why have others not been able to escape the suffering? I don't think we know the answer. But I do believe that in the face of our blessed existences, there lies an incomprehensible responsibility to bless and serve those less fortunate. So besides the obvious theme of where much is given, much is expected, this is to remind us that as Christians, our attitude may be to try to see all people being used by our great God who is love to bring about his good and expected end through the lives of those who are blessed and through the lives of those who seem to be cursed. Just think back to the Lord's parable of the rich man and Lazarus covered with sores on the rich man's thing. Just think about that. God was aware of both.